This is Ashley Finley at AAC&U and Bringing Theory to Practice, and I'm in the office with Dylan Joyce. Do you want to say hey?
Hi, I'm Dylan Joyce, Project Associate at Bringing Theory to Practice.
And Alexis Krivian is our backup tech support at AAC&U. She's here as well. Do you want to say hey?
Hi.
Hey. So thanks so much to all of you for taking the time to do this. And if you haven't heard me do this little part of the spiel before, this is the first that we've tried this in probably 10 years of Bringing Theory to Practice, is actually figuring out how to bring people together virtually, maybe to help build our collective capacity, particularly around assessment. And so it's a great opportunity to try to gather people. And I know this is a difficult time of the semester to do it. So an extra thanks for taking the time out of your busy lives and days to do this. I won't take too much time here because really the show is Bob's show, Bob Reason over at Iowa State. So I really just wanted to welcome you all, to let you know that the webinar is geared towards people, to all of you who have already committed to being in the consortium for the psychosocial initiative, and also for those of you who might still be considering it or just are kind of curious of what the PSRI covers. It really is supposed to be informative of how this tool can help you, why it would be of interest, and why we're so excited as a project to be working with Bob and have the opportunity to sort of join forces and mutually help both of our national initiatives, actually. I wanted to let you know that you have the option to send a note or question at any point. I mean, certainly you can interrupt Bob, I guess, but if you think that's too socially awkward or difficult, you can just send a chat question in the chat box, and I'll be monitoring those to try to keep track. And then we'll leave some time at the end as well for anybody to raise questions if they want.
And so a couple quick notes on that. First off, if you can send to all participants rather than to just the host, that will allow Ashley and Bob to monitor the questions at the same time. The chat feature right now is going to probably be in the bottom right of your screen, but when we begin screencasting, when you can see Bob's PowerPoint, there will be a chat option sort of from a drop-down menu at the top of your screen, but the basic idea is click where it says chat and send a message. Should be pretty straightforward. And the last thing is, if you are getting any sort of noise on your end, or if anybody's talking to you or whatever it is, you can mute your line by pressing *6, and that should improve the sort of general audio quality for the call. So if there's any sort of echo or anything like that, I'll just ask people to press *6 so that we can sort of eliminate variables, and that generally takes care of it. But with that, unless Ashley has anything else to add, I'm going to sort of pass the baton to Bob, and he is going to share a PowerPoint presentation with you.
Yeah. So I'll hand it over to Bob Reason at Iowa State. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you both. Wonderful. Thank you all for coming. I was interested to see your names and hear the number of institutions that are represented. Many of you I've spoken with, or I should say at least somebody at your institution and I have spoken over the last year. So it's nice to have those folks. It's also great to see a couple of new institutions. I, like Ashley said, want to give a broad overview of the PSRI, the Personal and Social Responsibility Inventory. Give you a sense of where we have been, where we're headed, what we've done, how useful it is, and then perhaps, and this may hopefully not get into too great detail, give you a sense of how to get registered if you're choosing to do so through the BT2P project, and what you might expect from us. So that's my agenda today. You, like Ashley said, you're open to ask questions, and I hope you will. Ask questions either verbally throughout or using the chat function. Ashley, you have my permission to interrupt me at any point in time if we've got chat questions that need to be answered. I am a faculty member, so I do talk a lot, so you can feel free to interrupt me at any point. So I won't I won't dally on or stand too long on this slide because I'm looking at myself and that's a little frightening. But I did want to introduce myself. My name is Bob Reason, and I am an associate professor at Iowa State in the Higher Education and College Student Affairs program. I have been at Iowa State now for just almost 3 years. Before that, I was at Penn State University in the same sort of position for about 10 years. And it's at Penn State where I got connected with AAC&U. I was a research scientist in the Center for the Study of Higher Education, and in that role was doing quite a bit of research around issues, particularly around first-year experience issues at that point, but was able to meet with meet the folks at AAC&U, and that's how I came to be connected with the personal and social responsibility inventory. I don't know how many folks know the story behind it. I'll give you an overview of the PSRI and how it began. But one thing I will say is that when I decided to move back to Iowa State in 2011 was about the time that we had decided to launch the PSRI as a standalone enterprise. And so it made perfect sense for it to come with me. One of the other roles I have at Iowa State is the director of the Research Institute for Studies in Education. And it is a tremendous facility that allows that has all of the resources to do a national level research and or evaluation survey like we're trying to do. So it made wonderful sense to bring it with me to Iowa State. We've spent the last couple of years getting it started, getting the bugs worked out, and we've now got a system in place with me and 2 and a half graduate students most of the time, doing most of the work around the PSRI. Before I go on, I do want to introduce Kevin Heemer, who is one of the 2 doctoral students in the Iowa State program working on the PSRI. He's in the room with me.
Hi, everybody.
He, I didn't get a photo of him up there, but you've seen enough. So AAC&U's Core Commitments Initiative was running in the mid-2000s, and in 2006, the Personal and Social Responsibility Inventory was created by a team of folks from AAC&U, a number of folks, including Karen Musil, and Lee Kneffelkamp, who was a senior fellow at AAC&U at the time, but also a faculty member at Teachers College in Columbia, and then a team from the University of Michigan, including a man named Eric Dye and a group of graduate students, and they were really the Lee and Richard Hirsch and some other folks, and then Eric and his team were the lead in creating this instrument and piloting it. So in 2006, they collected initial data from students and campus professionals at 23 leadership, we call them leadership consortium schools. And that is the data from which 3 major publications came out. One of them is on the slide right now. It's related to the findings related to engaging diverse viewpoints. And I assume, I know, these are still available for download at the AAC&U website. You might have to dig a little bit. But you can also order them from the AAC&U bookstore. There are 2 other ones that look kind of the exact same way, nice monographs with the blue cover and the trees. One about ethics, developing ethics and academic integrity, and the third one about civic responsibility and civic engagement and learning. And so those 3 major publications came just from the initial data collection in 2006. And that included about 24,000 undergraduates and about 9,000 campus professionals. So part of the story, so that was going on in 2006. I believe in 2009, kind of in a tragic, unfortunate twist, Eric Dye passed away, and so the leadership of the PSRI kind of passed on to me as I was working with Karen on some other things. And that's how I became involved with it, and have tried to I spent most of that year learning as much as I could about what Eric had done and what the team at Michigan had done. And then I said in 2011 it came with me to Iowa State. The Personal and Social Responsibility Inventory is a campus climate assessment instrument, and it measures campus climate around 5 different dimensions of personal and social responsibility. And you can see those 5 on the slide in front of you. We talk about the 5 dimensions are striving for excellence, cultivating academic integrity, contributing to a larger community or the importance placed upon contributing to a larger community, taking seriously the perspectives of others, and developing competence in ethical and moral reasoning and action. Those dimensions encompass or are comprised of several different factors and scales, so multiple items under each dimension, and each of those items contribute to a scale. And I'll get a little bit more into that as I show you some of the results and the way we think about and the way we give back the findings to a campus. But those are the 5 dimensions, and the way we have conceptualized personal and social responsibility. You see, and we'll sometimes talk about this. There are some of the dimensions that align with social responsibility, contributing to a larger community, taking seriously the perspectives of others. And there are some that are more closely aligned with what folks will think about as personal responsibility, academic integrity perhaps, striving for excellence. And then we go back and forth about where ethical and moral reasoning and action fit. So there are different ways to think about the dimensions of the PSRI, but those are the 5 that we talk about and we measure. So we have, since we came to Iowa State, included student outcome measures as part of this. One of the things that we did early on was include the openness to diversity and challenge scale. There's always been a self-reported measure of growth along each of the dimensions. And then for the BT2P project, specifically, we've added what we call a mental well-being scale that is flourishing. It's the positive mental well-being. And so for all of our kind of regular administration, we do one of these 3. Well, we do the openness to diversity and challenge primarily as our area of research interest. But institutions also get data related to self-reported student growth along the dimensions. And then you all, as part of the BT2P project, would get the flourishing scale. What I wanted to do real quickly is give you some sense of what we're finding already, because I think part of what I want to make sure I reinforce is that we're looking at, like some of the other major instruments kind of available for commercial use, like NESE, it's an environment scale, it's a climate assessment. But it becomes really useful at the institution level when we can connect those climates and students' behaviors within those climates to learning outcomes or other kinds of outcomes. And so over the last 3 years, we've been able to think about the way student behavior, student climates relate to or result in, we hope, growth. And so some big bullet point findings. Kind of in general, we're looking at the development along the dimensions. Students report the strongest growth over the course of college career in the work ethic and the developing perspective taking, which is really the kind of the diversity-related openness to diversity dimension. They report the least amount of growth in academic integrity, and unfortunately for me, and this is because this is my research interest, the idea of the sense of importance or commitment to contributing to the larger community. Part of what we need to do yet is dig in and figure out if students are already coming high in that area, and so the marginal increase is not very large, or if they start low and they end low. And that's part of the next set of research we need to be doing. But they report little growth in that sense of community and contributing to the larger community. When we added 2 years ago the the openness to diversity and challenge scale as an outcome measure. And from that, we've done some fun exploring. That is a scale, if folks aren't familiar with it, that Pat Teranzini and Ernie Pascarella created, I think, back in the 1980s, and has served as a wonderful diversity-related outcome, kind of a set of dispositions that we've used much over the last 2 or 3 decades to assess students' openness to.
Bob, I don't know if others are hearing this, but we're having a little trouble hearing you.
You're breaking up.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is that better?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Really? It's just a little bit, not much better.
No,
Not really.
No.
Huh.
What if I yell? Is that better?
I don't think so. Can everybody? I don't know if this will solve the
How
problem.
about-
But everybody, please
How about
press
this?
*6. That seems better.
Yes.
This is better. Well, I just picked up
Yep.
the headset, the handset.
That
There you
works
go.
much
That's
better.
better.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So anyway, what I was saying, and I apologize, but you surely don't want me to go back and start over. What I was sharing that we added the openness to diversity and challenge scale, which is an outcome that's been used in the literature since the early 1980s. And it's really a set of attributes or dispositions. It assesses a set of attributes or dispositions that students can develop that gives a sense of how open they are to being challenged intellectually or being challenged with diverse ideas, people, cultures, religions, and backgrounds. And so it's a sense of it's a foundational measure. The way most of us think about this is it's a foundational measure that needs to be in place before people can learn from engaging with diversity. And so it's in one sense, an intermediate outcome that's very important to the kind of education we're doing in the 21st century. So we added that a couple of years ago, and part of what we've been exploring is how do we is the connection between, in particular, the importance placed on community and people's openness to diversity. And we've also been finding some very good course-related predictors. And so we continue to explore that as an outcome. And folks who have engaged with or who have participated in the PSRI over the last couple of years get their student scores on the openness to diversity and challenge items and scale. Let's see if I can move this forward. There we go. And finally, just this last year, we have a small group of institutions who are part of the Bridging Theory to Practice project. And again, we've added the flourishing scale for these schools, and that's part of the bigger initiative of BT2P. And from the few schools we have, and from the really initial analysis that we've done, we're finding some really, I think, some very exciting things. The first is that all of the dimensions, all of students reported feelings about personal and social responsibility. So their scores on all of these dimensions are in one way positively, or in some way, related to the flourishing scale, which allows us, it gives us reason to continue, quite honestly. We can say with some level of certainty, not a ton yet, we need to continue this, but the environments we're creating around personal and social responsibility are related to and influencing students' sense of flourishing, or at least their responses to that scale. I'm really excited, again, because it's my personal research interest, that this idea of the importance they place on contributing to the larger community, the sense that they will engage with community service, civic engagement, is the strongest predictor, is most strongly related to the student scores on the flourishing scale. And then the other one, I skip a bullet here in front of you, but the social responsibility dimensions. Remember, I said sometimes we'll think about both contributing to the larger community and the perspective taking as the social responsibility dimensions. Those are the ones that seem to be related to flourishing. So there's something about belonging to, engaging with, and feeling a part of community, both on campus and off, and a sense of mental well-being. And that's an exciting, again, early on. That's a good reason to continue this research. We should be able to find some good connections, which will allow us to help institutions identify areas for improvement. So if you go back to an earlier slide, I said that contributing to the larger community is one of the least is the dimension with the least amount of growth. So if your institution is one that does that well, and students are growing quite a bit, we can talk about the sense of well-being and understand that if we find out based on the assessment that it is an area in which your institution is not doing well, or there's part of that where the institution isn't doing as well as they'd like to be doing, we can help identify that and use the connection with flourishing as justification to begin to spend more time and resources into this community development dimension. So that's some of the initial research we're finding, and we again, I'm pretty excited about it. So that's what we. So this would be an okay time for me to pause and before I switch into kind of how the nuts and bolts of the administration of the PSRI, and say, do you have any questions? And ask. Let me just open it up. Nobody's chatted yet, but are there questions folks would want to ask before we move on?
I have two.
Wonderful.
This is Michelle from Oregon State.
Hey.
Hi. I'm wondering, one, if this is only looked at from a student's perspective, or if you also look at faculty and staff, because I know our civic engagement has a faculty and staff volunteer day too, so I'm just interested if you're also looking at the larger campus community. And then two, can you just speak just briefly on the striving for excellence and why that's a weakest predictor?
I don't know.
Tied to civic engagement in some way, but
well, it isn't. So let me answer the second one first. Is I honestly don't know why it is, and we just don't have the data yet to figure out why it is the weakest. The striving for excellence is fairly narrowly defined to focus on academic excellence primarily.
Oh, okay.
And it may be that it's just not measuring the kinds of things that would be related to, in particular, mental well-being. And that could be it. It could be also that folks with high levels of, well, no, there's not a. Folks are thinking they're not related. The sense of academic excellence in the mental well-being. I was going to say something, but I was going to be wrong. So let me just stop there. I just don't know. The other question about faculty and staff. So we do administer the survey, and it's fairly similar to students, and they get one survey, and then campus professionals, they get another survey, and again, but they're fairly analogous. What we don't do, to answer specifically, Michelle, your question, is I don't believe on our professional survey we ask them if they have engaged in or how much they've engaged in community service. We ask them for their perceptions about the importance placed on contributing to the larger community, but we don't ask about individual faculty members or individual staff members' behaviors. Something to think about and talk about, though. It's not anything we would be opposed to adding.
And do you know if that contributes to the larger community feel as well?
So, speaking specifically about the flourishing scale, no. We do know, I'm digging for it because I want to be correct when I say this. We do know that the relationship, they're related. The findings of how much emphasis students believe are placed on community service and contributing to the larger community is related to what faculty members believe they do, although it's not a one-to-one relationship. There's some disconnect in the messages being sent from faculty and staff and received by students. But we do know from earlier research not related to flourishing, that faculty behavior and messages sent in the classroom is one of the strongest predictors of student behavior and student outcomes.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I can't answer your question directly, but I can make a couple of inferences. And the other thing I would say, a couple of the folks who started the PSRI at Michigan in graduate school are now faculty members, and one of whom is at the University of Iowa, just down the road from me. And she has been very interested in the faculty and staff data. Her name is Cassie Barnhard. And she's been very interested in the faculty staff data and doing some research. And so I know there's some presentations and publications coming out under her name. My research interest is primarily students, and so I tend to think first about students.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Other questions? Okay. Please, again, interrupt me or send Ashley a text or a chat if you have a question that comes up. Don't let it slip without asking. Let me move on to talk more specifically about the registration and the administration part and how the survey works for you. One of the things one of the messages I want you to leave with is that we spent the last 3 or 4 years getting this figured out so that it is as painless as possible for the campuses who are administering it. I'm looking at Kevin's face right now, which means it's as painful as possible to him. But we try to do most of the work at Iowa State, and folks who are receiving the survey and completing it, and folks who help us, the campus liaison, and you all should have very little effort. Should contribute very little effort. So it's meant to be a service. And I provide you here, I want to talk a little bit about the homepage and the registration form, but I also then provide you the website right there, and you can sure look at this. So if you were to click on that website or visit it at some point, you'll see much of the information I just shared with you, but you'll also see the registration tab on the left-hand side. And if you were to click on that, what we ask of you, if you choose to do is this information. There are a couple of very important things on this page. Obviously, the name of the institution becomes really important, but the name of the liaison. What we have done over the last couple of years is found that it's much better for everybody if we work specifically with somebody on campus, an individual who's committed to the project and who might have, if not working directly in the institutional research office, might have good connections at the IR office. So that's the name of the liaison, and that becomes our main contact person. And in our regular administration, we will also connect that liaison with an individual here. So when you call as the liaison, Michelle, if you're the liaison from Oregon State, and you call and I'm your advisor, you would call and just ask for Bob. You wouldn't be bounced around for individuals. And so you and I would build a relationship, and I would work directly with you. Not that you couldn't ask Kevin a question, but it would be a more direct relationship there. And that's been very helpful in kind of stopping miscommunication and limiting at least miscommunication. The other thing important for this group is that as part of the registration form, you're asked if you belong to any of these groups. And if you click on the AAC&U Bridging Theory to Practice institutions, then that signals to us that we send the bill to Ashley. And that's important. The other group is we've wanted to honor the work of the original 23 Leadership Consortia, and so we cut them a break as well. But as long as you're a member, if you click that you're a member of Bridging Theory to Practice, for at least this year and next, the project is covering the costs of the administration for you all. You also see right under that you will not get the invoice for services. That again goes to Ashley, but you would receive as the liaisons an agreement, a participation agreement, a list of things, a to-do list basically, and then the institutional profile form. And the first two things on your liaison to-do list is to complete the participation agreement and then complete the institutional profile form. But the other thing that we ask you to do is to connect with us, and then together, you and your contact person here will figure out the administration cycle. And what we have done is we found that about a 21-day administration cycle is the way for this to be most effective. We want to encourage folks to do it in the spring. Again, it's a climate survey, and we do use first-year students. And so part of the rationale is for our spring administration is that gives the first-year students enough time to get a sense of the climate before we ask them questions about it. We could do it in the fall, but then you've got first-year students who've been on campus for a month, who may not really have a good sense of the sense of climate. So we ask you for spring, and we really ask you honestly, if push comes to shove, we want you to do it before spring break. We've a noticeable decrease in responses post spring break. Our response rates go down quite precipitously after spring break. So between January and spring break, 21 days that work for you. So if there's a big event on your campus or something that you want to avoid, we can work through that and find out the best cycle for you. That 21 days starts with a note from a well-known campus official, and we've had campuses use the dean of students for their students, or the vice president for student affairs, the provost for their faculty and staff, or anybody from the president, a note from the president. And this note, and we'll provide you the language, basically introduces the idea of the survey and encourages folks to fill it out. It also lets everybody know that it's not a spam. It's something that's part of the institutional assessment cycle, and that they shouldn't feel bad about clicking on it. They shouldn't feel threatened by clicking on it. It's legitimate. So after that, our hope is that your active engagement, the campus active engagement with the administration, is done. So send out the note to everybody who's included in the sample, and then we will send out the next day normally, or a day or so later, an invitation with an individualized link. So it would say, "Dear student's name. The other day you received an email. Here's the follow-up. Please click on the link below. You've got, it'll take about 15 minutes to do." And so we provide the link at that point. That's the first invitation. And then we follow up for non-responders 3 or 4 more times over that 21-day cycle. And about the 21st day, we shut down. By the 3rd or 4th follow-up, we just don't get any more. We don't get much response. And so we've kind of tapped out who's going to respond by about the 21st day. So again, your active engagement will end right after the note from the campus official, and then we try to do as much as we can from here. The one place where we have sought help is if after the first follow-up, so invitation and then a follow-up, if our response rates are still low, we've gone back to campus officials just to let them know, so back to the liaison to let them know that responses are lower than we would hope, and encourage them to do something on their campus to reinvigorate to get the energy back up. And so there might be that kind of call back to your institution, but that would really be to just enhance the numbers, not asking you to do any more work for the data collection. So that's the administration process. We do ask from the IR office, I'm seeing now, the sample contact information. So we'll send emails directly to people, and we'll get from you information, get from the liaison or the IR office the email address and the first and last name of folks that we're going to send these emails to, so we can send a personalized email to everybody in the sample. All right? I'm going to turn now to the survey, and I'm keeping an eye on the clock because I do want to make sure I have time for questions. And just give you a quick example of what the survey looks like. This is a screenshot from the web-based survey, and all of our surveys are done online. And this is the demographic section, and so you'll see we have to update the what year did you enter the institution for next year, but it'll go from 2014 on back. But it asks very safe but specific information about the kind of student they are and the kind of experiences they're having. This screen grab is the first page of the Striving for Excellence item. So that dimension, Striving for Excellence, is described in that first paragraph, that bold paragraph at the top of the screen there. And then we start with a set of questions, and they all are on this 5-point scale, which helps with comparison later on, and allows us to ask the questions in this way. So that's what the Striving for Excellence, and that's what this is what the survey looks like, and every dimension kind of starts this way. One thing I would like to point out at this point is that our survey is constructed in modules. So each dimension is its own module, the demographic section is a module, and the outcome section is a module. We then, in order to kind of decrease the fall off, so if people decide they're going to quit after 4 dimensions, if they received the survey in the same order, we'd lose a lot of data on that 5th dimension. So students and faculty and staff receive this survey in random order. So even though we always talk about striving for excellence first, that might be the 4th dimension that you receive. It might be the 3rd dimension that somebody next to you receives. Everybody receives all 5 dimensions. They'll just be in a random order, and that helps us spread out the non-responses across the survey, and allows for much better data. The same is true of the outcome. It would be the outcome scale. So if we are doing BT2P and you're getting a flourishing outcome, that would be just embedded. So you might get that as the 4th module that you have to that you're asked to fill out, or you might get it first. So they come in random order. Each dimension also has an opportunity at the end for an open-ended response, and I want to make sure that we do pay attention to the open-ended response. Sometimes that's for the context to understand the statistics and the findings is often in those open-ended responses. So that's what the survey looks like. Any questions right now about that? You like the work ethic questions, Amanda?
Bob?
Yes.
This is Trina Jones at Wofford.
Hi. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good.
Good. Is there a place, or will there be a place where we can have access to the whole survey?
Yes, it's if you click on that website, it's available.
Okay.
And you can download it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What do you consider to be a low response rate?
So, excuse me. We have generally gotten from students in the 15 to 25% range for response rates. We do sample. We generally sample everybody, so we have a census of the entire student population, and we end up, depending on the type of institution, quite honestly, our ranges are quite wide, but between 15 and 25% is what we get back. Honestly, and just for small private liberal arts colleges, we've gotten in the 40s and 50%. We've done some larger, some commuter, some multi-campus institutions, and they've been low in the 10, 12, 15% range.
Okay.
But if we're down, go ahead.
Is the idea that we would administer the same survey at a later point to the same group of students so it could be changed?
Longitudinal.
Yeah.
I think that would be great. We've had one institution come back for a second time, so they'll have 2 snapshots. It's not technically a longitudinal survey because Well, I guess you know what. But before I say that, it's really two snapshots, and so you know um, what the climate was and what the outcomes were in spring of 2014, and then you can come back again in 2016 or 2017, and you have a snapshot that you can compare. Much the same way you would with NESE or CLA. You could compare snapshots. One thing I would say, and it would take a little bit of work at the institution level, because the student data comes back identifiable. So if there were enough of a group of students who took the survey both times, you really could think about understand it that as a longitudinal design, because you could have the same student responding at two different points in time. So it's really meant to be just a snapshot. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Kathy.
Yes. This is a little later question, maybe on the on what we get from the reports when we get the
okay.
back.
And we can.
So you can maybe address that when you get to that
part. I will. All right. So, and we may be getting there. So what you get from us? So you would get the data sets. So one of the first things we send back are cleaned data sets. So individual students and individual professionals' responses to all the items and the factor scores. So I remember I said under each dimension there are a set of scales that hold together statistical, they're constructs or factors. And so you get individual item responses for each person who completed the survey, and then you get the individual score, which is usually an average of a set of items that seem to be related to a single construct. You see on the slide the student's data is identifiable, and I just mentioned that. What this does is allow you to connect the student data to anything else at the institution level that you collect data about, which is really interesting. I would love to talk to an institution who has an intervention and they track their students, and they're able to connect students who have participated in a community service or event, or students who have gone to study abroad or engaged in a program, that they're then able to compare those students' responses to students who didn't participate. And that is something you could do. You could look at students by their major. You could look at students by their residence facility to see if climate or behavior is different in these different areas or different majors. And we have gone through our institutional review board, and because of the kind of data we collect and because of the access you already have to student data, because it's institutional improvement for you all, we believe we're very comfortable sending it back identifiable. We've been approved to do that. Professional data is different because these folks work at the institution. We do not send it back. We de-identify it. So you'll give us a faculty member's email address, and that's the way we talk to them and communicate with them, and that's connected to their responses when they respond to the survey. We take that off before we send the data set back to you. We actually take it a step further, and we have a set of protocols that we go through, so that if you could, at the institution level, zero in on somebody, and we would inadvertently be violating their sense of confidence because you could cross-tab two different variables and figure out who it is, we will go through a set of protocols that allows us to look at race, tenure status, department, those kinds of things. And we'll look pretty closely so that we don't inadvertently identify a faculty or staff member, because we really want to make sure we're being ethical in our administration. So they come back de-identified and might come back, quite honestly, having instead of college listed, it might come back with a set of 4 different areas as opposed to 12 different majors. Those are that's part of the protocol that we do. We also send back an institutional report that allows for national comparison and provides the open-ended responses. And this is going to get to Kathy's question in a minute. So the report comes back with a little bit of information about how to use it, and then a set of tables. And this table 4 here, we're sticking with the striving for excellence idea today, but it is how we would display the frequencies for all the responses on striving for excellence. So you can see exactly what you would get here. This table allows for the same. These are the factor scores I was talking about earlier. So they're averages, they're means. But this table arrays student means on. If you look here, overall climate for excellence, next to the professional responses, and this is at the national level. Or actually, no, this is fake national university. And so you get that. So you can compare what your students think with what your professionals are thinking. You get, what are we looking at here? Student responses on individual items within the factor. So the factor, is the overall climate for excellence. It falls under the striving for excellence dimension. And this particular institution gets their students average 3.87, so towards the high end of the scale. And then these are the individual items underneath it that make up or comprise that overall scale. And so you can really dig deeply into these data, and we provide a very similar set of analyses and tables for the professionals. So you get within institution comparison data and across institutions, you get the national averages to compare your individual institution scores with the national average. So Kathy asks about the report not having means and standard deviations.
Well, it has those, but not significance and effect size.
Yeah. So not having the statistical significance so that you can compare means and standard deviations. We have we've talked a lot about that, and I would be open to considering that. I would probably move towards effect size. We're getting now to the point where we've got enough students that we've got enough respondents, I should say, where any minor hiccup is going to be statistically significant. So, you're trying to differentiate between statistical significance and practical significance. So,
right.
My guess is that the difference between 396 and 392 might be statistically significant, depending on, well, it wouldn't be there, but depending on the size of the standard deviation, but it makes no practical difference.
Right.
We erred on the side originally of not including those kinds of evaluative statistics because the folks we were working with in our initial conversations didn't ask for them, and then we decided that because they were hard to interpret when you're looking at these huge numbers, that it was best not to include them. If that is something we need to revisit, I'd be happy to talk to folks about that. I don't want to send folks because the primary purpose of the reports is institutional level.
Right.
The being as accurate and as truthful as possible, so not false. I'm trying to parse my words. Not falsely imply that something's more important than it is because it is statistically significant.
Right. Yeah, the person who did our analysis said the lowest level of significance, you should really just ignore it.
I know, especially with these
because there's so much chance for a false positive there. So she really just pointed us to the highest level and said, take everything else with a big grain of salt.
Yes, and the flip side of that, quite honestly, and this is the old IR person in me, is if you know from the researcher, you know that this is important to your campus. but the different and you want to do better on this particular dimension, but the difference between your score and the national scale is not statistically significant at the .05 level. That doesn't mean you shouldn't spend time on it.
Right.
If it, so the flip side of this argument is I don't want to tell somebody the difference isn't important when it is at that campus level. And so we're trying to balance all of that. But I hear what you're saying, and I think the effect size, as I talk to folks, particularly at Harry out at UCLA with their SERP data, the use of effect sizes might help alleviate some of our concerns if we can figure out the right way to convey that information to folks who might not be as familiar with this kind of stuff, but still make it meaningful.
Right. Okay.
So, the last slide, I believe, second to the last slide, is you get all the student responses. All the open-ended responses, both from students and staff and faculty. So you get all of this. We don't do theming of the open-ended responses, and so we send it back, and it looks just like this. We do clean it up, and I tell you that because we go through it and search for naughty words and other things. We also make sure that they aren't targeting someone because we send you back the report and we assume that you make it public. So, if somebody's named in there, we may let you know so that you can do something about it, but that may come out of the public report. And if somebody's using inappropriate language or profane language or just inappropriate, again, you may see that as the liaison, but we'll clean that out of the public report. And so we don't mean we want to make sure that we're providing useful information in that way to you. Last slide is my contact information and as well as a little bit of information, much of which I already talked about, but it's information we share about our relationship with AAC&U and the work that led up to the PSRI. So, wow, it is according in Iowa it's 2:59. So we used up almost the full hour that we had, but I'm really open to any other questions if folks want to ask or if there are other things folks want to hear about. Please just let me know.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bob.
Yeah. Anybody?
All right, this is Ashley again at AAC&U. Just wanted to say thanks again to everybody for taking the time to join, and thanks so much, Bob, for taking the time to put this together. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. The take-home message for everybody that I want you to leave with, as you're thinking about whether or not you want to engage with us next year through the BT2P project, we work with you, and that is we'll find the appropriate days and the appropriate time for the administration, and we want to make sure that we're doing what is best for institutional improvement, which is our first goal. So this is first and foremost an institutional assessment project. We do use it for research, and we are, I'm a faculty member, and I work with doctoral students, and they want to do research. But it is first and foremost an opportunity to work with institutions who want to make improvements in these areas. And so part of our ethos is that we try to be as responsive as we can be.
This is
We appreciate that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dessa.
I just have a quick question, and I may have been mentally like in and out or something in terms of, but I just was trying to get more of a sense in terms of.
Dessa, you'd be surprised how many of my students say the same thing when they
Well, they have an excuse, right? Is the preference to go with a to survey the targeted group that might be involved in a particular intervention related to this study, or to go with a more general campus, like stratified sample population, or both?
It's a great question. My preference is that we do everybody. And part of that is because, again, we use this for research, but it also allows you a better understanding of the institutional climate around these issues. One thing we can do, and you could do, is if there is a group of who are participating in a targeted intervention, we can flag those folks so that when we send the data back to you, there's an extra variable in there that says these are the people who participated in that project. So if you're interested in saying, are these people different than people who didn't participate, then we could do that. We could make that very easy for you. In fact, we could do that for you. Those are the kinds of things. Those are the kinds of questions that we want to encourage people to ask. And so we can either identify those students before, or you can identify them after we send you back the data, and either way works for us.
Okay.
The limit, the reason I want to push folks to think about as big a sample as possible is because it's climate. And so you get individual level climate, individual students' perceptions of the climate, which is important, but as you think about the institution, you want as broad and as big a sample as you can get to really get a sense of how the climate is perceived. That's
Okay.
Great question, though. We have done, I've chatted with folks about pre-post as well. And so early in the fall, doing a group and a comparison group, and then doing the survey again in the spring. We're able to do things like that, or some combination thereof. So again, if there are specific items like that, we'd like to work with you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah.
And I'll be in touch, Bob. This
Good.
is Michelle from OSU. We're moving forward, so I'll be in touch very soon with you.
Good. There are some fun things to be done. So.
Yes, thank you so much.
I think Ashley is sharing the slides.
We are, and we've recorded the session as well. So if you all have colleagues that you'd like to walk through both the slides and even the recording, we'll have Dylan will make that available as soon as possible.
Thank you. So my contact information is on there. You've got the PSRI website. The generic email is psri@iastate.edu. Please send us if you have questions anytime after this. Just let us know.